I would say we are now officially in the dog days of the offseason. The NHL draft has came and gone. Free agency has really died down. The news is going to be few and far between, I would say, from now until the start of training camp and preseason. With that being said, though, there is still some pretty significant names on the UFA market. So in this video, I want to go over a list of those names, talk about the players a little bit, maybe where they could sign. And just as a heads up before we get started, I'm not going to be talking about Patrice Bergeron or David Krejci because we all know the situation there. They are either going to re-sign in Boston, likely on one-year deals, or they're going to retire. Also, this list is in no particular order, so let's go ahead and get started with the first player, Filip Zadina, who was kind of a surprise addition to the UFA market. It was reported that Filip Zadina had requested a trade away from the Red Wings around the time of the NHL draft. Steve Yzerman said that he was working to accommodate Zadina's request, however, he just could not find a trade partner. It didn't stop there. Yzerman would then try and place Filip Zadina on waivers, where any team in the league could claim him. All they would have to do is take on the remaining years of his contract. As we know, nobody decided to claim Zadina. He cleared waivers, and then the Red Wings and Zadina worked together to terminate the remaining years of his contract. Before contract termination, Filip Zadina had 2 years left on his deal at a cap hit of $1.825 million. I know Filip Zadina really wanted a fresh start, but man, he's making a big bet on himself, leaving that kind of money on the table given how his NHL career has went up until this point. There's no guarantee he's going to see money like that ever again. The most I can see a team signing Filip Zadina for right now is like maybe a 1 year, $1 million deal max. And if that doesn't work out, then this is going to be looked back on as a very poor decision by Zadina. But hey, you got to at least respect his will to bet on himself to this extent. I still think there's something there with Filip Zadina. Obviously, he was a 6th overall pick by the Red Wings in 2018. He's shown flashes and had stretches of really strong play at the NHL level. The consistency just hasn't been there. The finishing ability just hasn't been there. He's had some really unlucky injuries as well, so we'll see what happens with Zadina. I think at this point in his career, he's definitely still worth a look. He's going to get signed. He's going to get probably a 1-year prove-it deal somewhere, and hopefully he makes the best of it. I don't see any scenario where he ever lives up to, what was once expected of him when he was selected 6th overall, but again, I still do think there's something there. I think this is a guy who can at the very least be, a top 9 winger at the NHL level. Moving on to the next player, we have right shot defenseman Matthew Dumba. Had a previous cap hit of $6 million, likely not going to make that much on his next deal, wherever that may be. His offense really dried up this past season at just 14 points in 79 games. That is the lowest point total he's put up in a full season in his NHL career. This is a defenseman who once had a 50-point season with the Wild. Even though he's coming off of a down year offensively, still a little bit surprised that Matt Dumba is still on the market, given how thin the market was for defensemen, especially right shot defensemen. They come at a premium. Maybe he's asking for too much, or maybe he's just taking his time, weighing all of his options. Who knows? This is a guy who's been a staple in the Minnesota Wild's top 4 really over the past 7 seasons. He's averaged over 20 minutes of ice time per game. I'm getting the feeling that we're going to see Matt Dumba sign a deal similar to what John Klingberg signed in Toronto, 1 year, maybe in the range of 3 or 4 mil, bank on himself having a big year, and then really cash in next offseason when the cap goes up and there's a lot more money to go around. Moving along now to the next player. Speaking of offense drying up, we have Jesse Puljujarvi, who's coming off of a season in which he scored just 5 goals between the Edmonton Oilers and the Carolina Hurricanes. 0 of those goals coming with the Carolina Hurricanes. 17 games played for them after the deadline. 0 goals in their 7 playoff games as well. The finishing ability from Jesse Puljujarvi this past season was just non-existent, and this is coming after 2 pretty strong seasons with the Oilers where he scored 15 goals in 55 games and then 14 goals in 65 games after returning from Finland. Now, even with the lack of offensive production, Jesse Puljujarvi is still a very strong forechecker, has fantastic defensive numbers, somebody that I think definitely at the very least still has a place in the league as a shutdown forward on a 3rd or 4th line, but part of me feels like maybe that's not what Jesse Puljujarvi wants for himself. I could see a scenario, honestly, where he goes back to Finland. I'm really intrigued to see what happens with Puljujarvi. If he gets signed to a cheap short-term deal and he can get back to being a 15-plus goal guy, with how impactful he is defensively and his forechecking ability, that's a very valuable bottom 6 to middle 6 winger. Moving along now to the next UFA, we have Patrick Kane. Definitely name recognition-wise, the biggest name player on the market still. Patrick Kane is coming off of probably the worst season he's had in his NHL career, 57 points between the Chicago Blackhawks and the New York Rangers. Kane is somebody who I feel like we're probably not going to see sign anywheres until closer to, training camp, maybe even into the preseason because he's not going to be ready for the beginning of the season anyways. He underwent hip surgery this summer. I'm sure Patrick Kane is probably going to wait to see how everybody's roster is shaping up as we actually get closer and closer to the start of the regular season. Obviously, Kane is not the game-breaking offensive talent that he used to be, and who knows what he's going to look like now coming off of a hip surgery as well. But based off of what we saw from Patrick Kane last season, this is somebody who I feel like can still be a very productive and useful player in the right situation. Patrick Kane gives you next to nothing in terms of a 200-foot game. He's not a very good play driver anymore at this point in his career either, but obviously still has an unbelievable set of hands, fantastic playmaking ability. Even if Patrick Kane can barely skate anymore after this hip surgery, he's somebody who's still going to be deadly on the power play. I feel like the ideal situation for Patrick Kane is maybe he gets third line minutes at 5-on-5, but does a lot of his damage on the power play. Gets top line power play minutes. He's obviously somebody who knows what it takes to win. I think he could really benefit a young team as kind of a locker room guy as well. I'd like to see him sign in Buffalo. Obviously, he was born there. He grew up in Buffalo. He grew up a Sabres fan. I would really like to see him go there on maybe a one-year deal. Continuing on now, next up we have Vladimir Tarasenko, who I would say is probably the best player on the market currently. At 31 years old, I still believe in Tarasenko's ability to get you 25 to 30 goals in a season. He had just 18 goals in 69 games this past season between the Blues and the Rangers, but the season prior he had a career year, was well over a point per game, buried 34 goals in 75 games. He's still a bona fide top 6 winger. Based off of all the recent reports, it sounds like it's down to the Carolina Hurricanes and the Ottawa Senators in the Vladimir Tarasenko sweepstakes. I feel like both of those teams definitely make a lot of sense for Vladimir Tarasenko. Carolina could definitely use the finishing ability, and when it comes to the Ottawa Senators, they could be looking to get somebody like Tarasenko to replace Alex DeBrincat in the top 6. The Senators do have the advantage over the Hurricanes in terms of cap space. They could definitely offer more money to Vladimir Tarasenko, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens, who comes out on top, who actually ends up signing Tarasenko. His agent has said they're taking things with a really patient approach, that they're not going to rush into things, and Tarasenko really wants to weigh all of his options, so that's the reason he hasn't signed anywhere just yet. But I think this is a signing that we're probably going to see happen at some point in the next 48 hours. Moving along now to the next player, we have Max Comtois, formerly of the Anaheim Ducks, who was not given a qualifying offer by Anaheim, which led to him becoming a UFA. Comtois, 24 years old, was a second-round pick by the Ducks back in 2017. He's a big body, plays with some bite. His offensive production has definitely dried up over the past couple of seasons after having a breakout year in 2020-21 where he had 33 points in 55 games, 16 of those points being goals. That's obviously well over a 20-goal pace across an 82-game season. After that breakthrough season, it was looking like this is a guy who's probably going to be a pretty significant part of the Anaheim Ducks' future. Obviously, things didn't play out that way. I still feel like he's a very interesting name as a UFA, similar to Philip Zadina in the sense that a team could sign him to, a one-year, $1 million prove-it deal or something along the lines of that. Even though the last 2 seasons haven't gone the way Comtois would have liked, I don't think that 16-goal, 33-point season in just 55 games was a fluke. This is a guy who was a big-time offensive producer in junior, produced well in the small sample size we've seen from Comtois at the AHL level, has also produced well for Team Canada in a couple of World Junior tournaments. I feel like there's something there with Max Comtois. I think this is a guy who can at the very least be, a regular in a team's bottom 6, somebody who plays with an edge, can chip in maybe 15 to 20 goals a season. I feel like that's still achievable for Comtois at this point in his career. He's definitely a guy that I feel like is at least worth taking a chance on a cheap one-year deal. And now for the final player we're going to cover in this video, we have Thomas Tatar, 32-year-old winger, had a previous cap hit of 4.5 mil. I feel like his next contract will probably come in at around 3.5 to 4 mil, maybe something like that. Thomas Tatar has been a very consistent goal scorer throughout his career, 7 20-plus goal seasons in his career so far, including last season where he had 48 points in 82 games. I feel like Thomas Tatar would be a great signing for almost any team in the league that's looking for some depth scoring, an added punch of finishing ability in the middle 6. The Minnesota Wild are a team that comes to mind amongst playoff teams this past season. They scored the lowest amount of goals per game during the regular season. Thomas Tatar is just a really solid pro, somebody who's not going to break the bank, somebody that you probably don't have to give a bunch of term to either. He's easily one of the best players left on the market. I think the only other guys that are still UFAs who scored more goals than Tatar this past season are Patrick Kane and Patrice Bergeron. So that is going to wrap up today's video. Those are some of the most intriguing names, in my opinion, left on the free agent market. As always, I want to know your guys' thoughts, so let let me know where you think all of these players we talked about in this video are going to end up signing. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave it a like. That is the best way to show your support. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this all summer long, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you all soon.